My name is Whitley. I am 33 years old, and I have a very specific job. I find money that other people have tried to hide. It is what I do every single day to make a living for myself and my daughter. So it is almost a little funny that the one thing my own mother chose to hide from me was a locksmith. I came home one morning to find a van parked in our driveway, and that was the morning my mother decided that my 4-year-old little girl, and I no longer live in her house. I had been away for 3 days working on a project called an audit. When I pulled up to the house at 6 in the morning, still exhausted from the airport, I saw a brand new lock on the front door with a keypad. All of my clothes were sitting outside on the hot sidewalk. The Arizona sun was already baking them. My daughter Olive's little sneakers, the ones that light up when she jumps, were sitting in 110-degree heat. The rubber was going soft. The little lights inside had stopped working completely. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. She wrote that my room now belonged to my brother, told me to come get my things from the grass, and said not to make a scene. I read it twice. I didn't call her. I didn't stand in that driveway and cry. But there was something my mother had forgotten. 2 years ago, I was the reason she didn't lose that house to the bank. I was the reason it didn't go to auction. And I am a person who never, ever throws away important papers. By the night of her 60th birthday, a sheriff would walk right into her backyard, in front of 40 people she had personally invited, and hand her an envelope that explained exactly what I had done and exactly why it mattered. T.O. understand why that morning hit the way it did. You need to know who I was before I stood looking at those melted shoes. After my divorce, I moved back to the city of Mesa with Olive. I am a forensic accountant, which is just a large way of saying I am a professional who looks for mistakes and lies in money records. Companies hand me enormous stacks of bank papers and ask me to find stolen money. I am very good at this work. I stay calm. I don't get into loud arguments. Instead of fighting, I make sure the numbers tell the truth. That discipline is usually far more powerful than any amount of yelling that why Mother Sharon told me I could live in her back bedroom for $1,200 a month. She said, "Why would you pay rent to a stranger when you can help your own family?" So I agreed. For 3 full years, I paid her on the first day of every single month. $1,200, transferred directly into her bank account. We had no formal contract, just a handshake and the assumption that family meant something. But because of the nature of my work, I paid close attention to everything around me. I was the one in that house who knew which bills were late and which ones were urgent. My brother Brett lived 2 states away and helped with nothing at all. Brett was always, as our family put it, trying to fix his life. In our house, that was just a polite way of saying he was waiting for his next big mistake to arrive. Every afternoon I pulled into that driveway in the heavy desert heat, carried Olive inside past her chalk drawings that the sun bleached away by noon, and told myself that living there was just temporary. I told myself my mother could see how hard I was working. But a person who studies money for a living should know that people are very skilled at hiding things when they don't want them found. I never imagined I would one day need to turn those skills on my own mother. Back in February, my mother announced her 60th birthday party the way someone announces a royal event. She wanted a tent, a caterer, 40 guests from the church in the neighborhood, and she wanted me to handle all the details. She said, "Whitley, you are so good at organizing things." Then, almost in the same breath, she mentioned that Brett was moving back home. His car business had failed, and his marriage was finished. She said a man like him needed a safe place to land. I asked where he would sleep. She waved her hand and said we would figure it out, and then she added, almost as a casual observation, that I was a strong one and didn't really need the house. She said it the way you say the sky is blue. It wasn't shouted or cruel. It was just heavy point 2 days after that conversation. A white van from a company called Valley Lock, and Key was sitting in the driveway. I saw a man on a ladder at the front door. I asked my mother about it on my way out. She didn't look up from her phone. She told me the back gate was sticking, and he was just fixing it. But the front door is not the back gate. I noticed that. I am someone who notices when things don't line up, and that didn't line up, but I had a flight to catch. I was heading to a work site for 3 days where phones had to be locked away during the audit. So I tucked that uneasy feeling aside, kissed Olive, told my mother I would see her Friday, and walked right past a man who was making sure I could never come back through that door. When I returned on Friday morning, I found out the locksmith had never touched any gate at all. My things and Olive's things were scattered across the concrete. Shirts, her car seat, trash bags that had been ripped open, her light-up sneakers sitting in direct sun with the rubber gone soft and the lights dead. I walked to the door and typed my code into the new keypad. 3 flat red beeps. I tried again. 3 more red beeps. Then my phone buzzed with that text that I didn't feel angry in any loud way. What I felt instead was that cold, still clarity I get when a set of financial records finally reveals its truth. I put my phone in my pocket and I started taking pictures. I photographed the new lock, the sticker on it, Olive's melted shoes, and the text message with its timestamp clearly visible. I spent 11 minutes documenting that scene before I let myself feel a single thing. In my work, the first rule is always to build a file before you open the case. I sat on that hot ground in my work clothes and photographed a child's melted shoe the way I would photograph evidence of a crime, because that is precisely what it was. My mother thought she was pushing me out. She was actually handing me everything I needed. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to Olive. She was at her friend Maddie's house a few streets away. I told her in my cheeriest voice that she got to have one more surprise night with her friend. She was delighted. Then I started loading our things into the car, Olive's stuffed rabbit and her toys first. My neighbor Lorraine came outside in her robe, holding a coffee cup, wearing the look neighbors wear when they already know something has gone wrong. She told me she had seen the locksmith on Tuesday and had watched my mother putting things out early that morning. I asked for her number in case I ever needed a witness. She gave it to me without hesitating. I sat in my car with the air conditioner running and made myself one promise. Olive would sleep somewhere safe tonight with a lock that worked for us. Everything else, the money, the house, my mother, could wait. I drove away not knowing where we would sleep, but I knew I would be the one holding the key, and I had a witness who had seen it all. That night, while Olive slept, I sat in a motel room with a notepad and did what I do best. I added the numbers. 3 years at $1,200 a month equals $43,200. I had no written contract, but I had 3 years of bank transfers that created a paper trail as clear as anything I had ever seen in a courtroom. Money always leaves a path. I looked at what it would cost to get our own place, buy furniture, start over. It was going to be difficult. But there was something else I had been carrying for 2 years, something my mother had completely forgotten about. Sitting in that quiet motel room, I thought to myself, she thinks she locked me out, but she has no idea what she has locked herself into. I slept a few hours and then opened a folder on my computer. I named it Exhibits. By the following morning, I had 11 pieces of evidence and hadn't spoken to a lawyer, yet I decided to give my mother one opportunity to make things right. On Saturday, I called her. She sounded cheerful and unbothered, as though nothing unusual had happened. I told her that changing the locks on a paying tenant is illegal in Arizona. She told me I wasn't a tenant. I was just her daughter. She said family helps family and told me not to be ugly about it. Brett needed the room. I was the strong one. There was again the same sentence used like a permission slip to take from me. I asked her to think about Olive's safety. She called me dramatic and hung up. 10 minutes later, Brett sent me a picture of my old room, freshly repainted, his computer set up where Olive's bed used to be. He sent a thumbs up and said no hard feelings. The office was going to be great. I looked at that picture for a long time. I didn't reply. I have learned over many years that the people who come out ahead are the ones who stay quiet, while everyone else keeps talking. Why Saturday afternoon my phone was full of messages from relatives. My Aunt Pat said my mother was heartbroken and begged me not to ruin the birthday party. A cousin told me I had abandoned my family. My mother had spent the week building a version of events in which she was the wounded party, and I had chosen to leave on my own. She is a woman who has spent 60 years making people love her, and her story spread quickly. I felt the old familiar pull to explain myself, to send a long message setting the record straight. I started typing one to my aunt. Then I stopped. I realized my mother's weapon was her story, but my weapon was the truth I could prove with documents. Gossip needs people to believe it. A deed of trust doesn't care about anyone's feelings. I deleted the long message and sent a short one. I hope the party is lovely, Pat. Then I went back to my folder. On Sunday, I returned to pick up the remaining items. My mother had moved everything to the sidewalk where the neighbors could see. She was smiling and waving as though she were the kindest woman on earth. I walked to the door and typed my old code one final time, while Lorraine watched from her yard. 3 red beeps. I noted the time and moved on. Through the front window, I could see Brett's desk. Then I noticed a new sign on the small guest house at the back of the property. Desert Casita, now booking. She wasn't just giving my room to Brett. She was converting the back house into a short-term rental for strangers, and she needed me gone to do it cleanly. I loaded my car, closed the trunk without slamming it, and left. She wanted a quiet daughter. She forgot that I am at my most quiet right before I act. Olive and I moved in with my friend Dana, a sharp and no-nonsense woman who sat me down the first evening and said, "Whitley, you find lies for corporations for millions of dollars. Now you need to find the truth for yourself." She told me people get away with hurting family because we feel too guilty to stop them. She helped me find a housing attorney named Claire. Dana told me to bring everything, the photos, the texts, and the secret I had been carrying. I admitted I had a folder. Dana smiled and said, "Good girls keep diaries, but smart women keep folders." The next morning I called Claire, and then I called my grandfather Hank, who is 81 years old and the most honest person I have ever known. I told him everything. He reminded me that the house had belonged to my father and that my mother had not earned the right to change the locks simply because she lived there. He told me that 2 years ago I was the one who saved that house, and he had been there to see it. He told me not to let her tell people I had been a guest in the house I rescued. His words steadied me. He said he would be at the party on Friday because an honest person should be present. Before my meeting with Claire, I found my mother's listing for the Desert Casita online. She was already collecting money from guests. I checked the city of Mesa's requirements for short-term rentals. She had no license. I checked the neighborhood's HOA rules. Short-term rentals were explicitly prohibited. She was violating 3 separate regulations simultaneously. I printed everything and added it to the folder. I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remember my daughter's shoes at Claire's office was simple and quiet. I laid out everything I had. She confirmed what I had researched, that Arizona law prohibits a landlord from changing the locks and removing a tenant's belongings without going through the courts. It is called a self-help eviction, and it is illegal. She told me I was owed money for what had been done. Then I showed her the envelope I had been carrying for 2 years. Inside was a promissory note for $26,800, secured by a deed of trust against the house. My mother had signed it when I stepped in to prevent the bank from taking the property. She had almost certainly never read it carefully. Claire looked at the document and asked quietly whether my mother understood what she had signed. I told her I didn't think she did. Claire said this changed everything. We planned to sue for the illegal lockout, demand repayment of the loan, and report the rental violations to both the city and the HOA. I called a locksmith company and obtained their records, which showed the locks had been changed at 2:14 in the afternoon. On the Tuesday, I was away at work. That was the last piece I needed. I called Grandpa Hank one more time to ask whether I was being too harsh by doing this during her birthday week. He said that mercy does not mean allowing people to steal from you. He said my father worked his whole life, so his family would have a safe home, and my mother had broken that promise. He said my father would be proud of me for protecting myself and for protecting Olive. That was enough that on Friday morning I went to the courthouse and filed the papers. I sent the formal notice regarding the loan. I reported the rental to the city and to the HOA. By that afternoon, the listing had been taken down. My mother began calling me repeatedly because she had realized she could not refinance or borrow against the house while my name appeared on the title. I let it ring until the 12th call. She asked what I had done to her house. I told her I had simply recorded the documents she signed 2 years ago and that she should speak with my lawyer after Friday. Then I stayed home with Olive while my grandfather attended the party. He told me everything afterward. There were 40 guests. My mother gave a speech about how family is the most important thing in the world. Then a sheriff's deputy walked through the back gate and handed her the envelope The yard went completely silent. She opened in front of everyone and understood, for the first time, that the whole family now knew I was the person who had saved the house she was standing in. She called me on speakerphone and began shouting. I stayed calm. I told her it wasn't a scene, it was just a court date. I told her I wasn't trying to take the house. I was the reason she still had one. The guests left one by one. The party was finished. The court ruled that my mother had acted illegally by locking me out. She was ordered to begin repaying the $26,800. Brett moved out because the house could no longer support his plans. The neighbors learned the truth without me having to say a single word about it. Olive and I have our own apartment now, with a lock that belongs to both of you, as my mother called once and told me she hadn't believed I would actually go through with it. I told her that had always been the problem. We don't speak much now, but I am at peace. Being the strong one in a family does not mean you are required to absorb whatever is done to you. It means you have the strength to stand for yourself using truth instead of anger. I learned that documents are patient. They don't get tired. They don't get emotional, and they don't back down. Neither do I.